folks, welcome to Project Gamma. At Project Gamma, we have smart conversations with smart people across entrepreneurship, technology, and cybersecurity. My name is Warner Moore. I'm a technologist and security leader who helped build multiple business-to-business software as a service companies, who's passionate about modern cybersecurity practices. I'm also the founder of GammaForce. At GammaForce, we help tech and health tech companies with cybersecurity strategy through fractional executive services and serving as our client's fractional security organization. Today, I'm super excited to have Ray Bohac with us today. Ray's an entrepreneur and technologist who's had success as a serial entrepreneur focused in the contact center industry. He and his co-founders had a successful exit after having built and sold CallCopy. Most recently, Ray co-founded Spearfish.AI, where they're using AI to reimagine how contact centers operate. You've done 0 to 1 more than once, Ray. In fact, you're doing it again a fifth time. As a technical co-founder and builder, what are some of your harder earned lessons?
Yeah, hey Warner. Thanks for having me, by the way. Lesson-wise, jumping right into that, it's an interesting problem starting with an idea and trying to make a product and then finding the product market fit. And our first company, CallCopy, which actually rebranded to Uptivity just before we sold it. So you might see that name in the news and the press. We built a solution to a problem for ourselves at a company that I worked for, and then we brought it to market. And one thing that I found is that although we were solving our own problems, what the market needed was something slightly different. And we had to take some time to rethink how we package it, how we present the solutions to the customer. And oftentimes, being a technical founder, we thought they were technical solutions that the customer needed solved, when in fact they couldn't care less. They just wanted something to solve the problem and have it work and make sure that it was supported really well. And so there was a big mind shift that we had to make in just how we think about what we're building and being very purposeful, not only about really good technical solutions to solve the thing directly, but also really good solutions to support it and present it to the customer.
Hmm. I like your point about technology not necessarily being what the customer cared about. I think as technologists and entrepreneurs, we frequently apply technology generically in the sense of there are categories of space where the humans are what are creating the value. So certainly we can use technology to automate it. Recruiting, right?
Right,
Recruiting is a
yeah,
very people-centric job. But if we take people out of it, it's reducing the value of the thing that's being done in the first place. So it's not to say there is an opportunity, but acknowledging the value that people create, I think is super important.
totally.
You're the man for contact center and
Uh-oh.
C-Bus. Share your journey. Why the contact center industry?
Yeah, so this might help kind of frame the previous question a little bit too, with a little context on where I've spent my time. I accidentally landed in the contact center space. Graduated high school in 1998 from Mount Vernon, Ohio. And while in high school, helped form a dial-up provider. If you remember the 90s, we didn't have broadband, right? So a Columbus-based company, once I moved to Columbus, called NetWalk, actually hired me. They were the dial-up provider in Columbus. Warner, I don't know if you knew this whole story.
No, I did. I
And
had an account on NetWalk. That was my favorite ISP in 614 for a minute. It was on the
yeah.
short list at top. I love the multi-unit user Unix server. And that was
Well, I actually never ended up working in that business. So they had a sister company called Calltech. I don't know which one was parent, which one was, but they actually put me on a programming task first to try to solve a problem, and it was in a language I'd never worked on. It was Delphi back then, which is object-oriented Pascal. I did have a little experience with Pascal, just kind of in high school. Ended up solving a problem which was a for an application that they called soft phone, which was all the call center agents that they had a control application that controlled, whether or not they could receive phone calls and where they transferred to them, putting them on hold, things like that.
And that
So
was 2000, right?
yeah,
That
oh
was
01, I think.
pre-VoIP. So that was
Oh
cutting
wait,
edge at the
yeah,
time.
pre-VoIP, absolutely, yeah, and it actually controlled a physical analog phone, believe it or not,
Hmm.
that was on the employee's desk. So we used that as the audio path, and then we used the digital control over IP. That was before quite a few technology. REST wasn't even a technology. We used to have to do memory management in the software, like this is before garbage collection and all that, right? And so there were a lot of challenges to solve. Long story short here, stayed in that, wrote a bunch of applications that helped run the call center operations. So the real time statistics and analytics. So how many calls are in queue and where are they going and are they going to the right people? And then call recording. So when you hear this call may be monitored or recorded, we were buying those systems and decided to build my own. Actually, I saw how expensive they were, frankly, and I was really unimpressed with the architecture of the technical architecture. And back then, a lot of the systems were built to either be call logging, so like courtroom or public safety logging, or they were built for quality monitoring, which was random sampling. So when you hear this call may be monitored for quality, it would sample, 2 to 5% of the calls and only store those.
Hmm.
And back then, we didn't, storage wasn't cheap or free like it is now, right? And so you had to have those types of solutions. Um, so ended up building my own with the permission of my employer, and eventually they asked if they could use it. So we worked out a deal, a really cool deal. And I thank them. I can't thank them enough. They allowed me to work on it actually as part of my job as long as I got to use it. So I worked on it daytime and nighttime for quite a while, and then about a year into it, partnered with some of my coworkers, and that's who we actually brought it to market with, is that founding team.
It's incredible. That's a great
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
I
So
I started my career in the early days in the internet. I usually skip that part of the story because no one wants to hear about UUCP email. People don't even remember it existed, right? But back then it was all dial-up, right? Unless
yeah,
we were in academia and super fortunate with bandwidth, right? But
exactly.
I always enjoy revisiting those stories. I mean, usually the narrative starts around websites, right? The dot-com era, because more folks can relate to that. The founder's story of CallCopy, that's just incredible that they let you bootstrap the company as an early customer working. That's such a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. We bootstrapped it internally within their company, and they saved a lot of money by doing that, right? These were systems that cost usually six figures each and had some sort of a 18% to 20% annual maintenance contract on them times 8 call centers and multiple systems per call center, right? So it added up pretty quick. And eventually they exited at the same time. And we had some stock options, so that gave us a little bit of breathing room from, kind of the paycheck to paycheck to being able to take a step back and gamble on something brand new. We slowly started, joining Team CallCopy and bringing it to market. And there's probably hours and hours of lessons learned that we can go through. But the just kind of fast forwarding, we were able to eventually grow that business to, I think it was a couple thousand customers, big brands too. U-Haul was our first really big customer that everybody recognized, but Quicken Loans, OnStar, Google, McDonald's used it, UPS. So lots of banks and other insurance and industries, those types of industries used it as well. And there was a lot of change that occurred. So you mentioned voice over IP. That came actually after we started. The voice over IP existed on the backhaul side, so on the carrier side, but not at the desktop. And so that actually is one of the, I think, major contributors to our when we boomed, is we were one of the first systems that could support both voice over IP and traditional wiretaps. And I literally mean physical wiretaps, punching wires on wires and splicing wires, right? We used to do that. And So that allowed us, that was one of I think the first lessons we learned was creating a product that the market needed, a kind of a forward-looking product. We
Mhm.
created a transition product so that customers could buy from us one time. And as they migrated their internal technology, they didn't have to rebuy. We just migrated with them,
Hmm.
right? And so it made very, very long-standing relationships, very sticky customers as a result of it. But anyway, we exited that in 2014 to a public company, and on that ride, it kind of started another company or two. I don't know how far you want to go into that, but um, that's kind of what started the cycle of staying in this industry.
Great stories. Yeah, getting pulled into it like that was such opportunity. Like lean into that for sure. You've bootstrapped, and now you've closed a 1.5 million seed round. What's on your top list of things to get done right now?
Yeah, so I think maybe we should talk about why we raised a little bit because especially in the Midwest here, in the kind of the 2000s, it was a lot harder to get capital, right? So we only knew bootstrapping because it was really about the thing that was available to us. And so just to be clear on what bootstrapping is for those that don't know, it's essentially selling product and then using the revenues generated from selling that product to fund your company. And often that means working with your early adopter customers and coming up with unique contract structures and incentives and maybe discounts, maybe prepay arrangements, those types of things to help fund your business. Usually there's a benefit, a mutual benefit with your customer to doing those types of things. We're still doing that type of an arrangement with Spearfish, but right, I know that you like these podcasts to be a little timeless, but we are in a time where we have a rapidly developing industry with AI, and there's a lot of things being done wrong. And I think we have some very unique insights as we've owned and operated call centers. We've sold enterprise technology to call centers, contact centers, and I still have to
I catch
change the
myself
name.
doing that
Yeah.
too.
And we know a lot of the distribution channels because they've sold our technologies in the past. We have great relationships, and just to capitalize on the time frame, it made more sense to dilute a little bit as co-founders and raise some capital to get to market faster. And what that means is accelerating selling, obviously, but also being able to hire some development team members early on, more so to free up my time and Matt Madsey, my co-founder, his time to focus on customer growth initiatives instead of the plumbing of the application, if you will, right? And so we're fortunate to bring on some team members. One of them that actually worked at CallCopy and a couple of other companies. So we keep kind of bringing the band back together, if you will, to do this. But the goal of the raise again was establishing product market fit. So, and I think this is kind of important. We we raised pre-revenue, meaning we had customer interest, but no checks written. We do now. We're at the end, but the promise to the investor group is, hey, we have enough experience. We believe that we have a unique perspective on the market, as validated by things right that we can talk about, and we want to accelerate the timeline it takes to get to where there's product market fit validation by customer. And the way to define that is essentially customer relationships that aren't pre-existing relationships that are willing to buy because of the merit of the solution you sell. Right. It's easy to get early adopter customers if they're friends. That's not product market fit validation. But actually having a net new customer that didn't know you beforehand or it wasn't a strong relationship and said, hey, this thing's valuable enough that it's the right solution for me, that's product market fit. So we're working on that phase now. And then once we have that established, which will inform quite a bit of pivoting on our part, by the way, that's when we step on the gas pedal even more, maybe do a Series A, or if cash flows merit it, maybe we don't need to, but that's when we accelerate selling even more.
Now, there are two big takeaways I heard in there that I want to highlight. The first one is being strategic about capital. And you're talking about how you're using it to capture market quickly. And
Right.
that is among the better reasons to seek outside capital as opposed to bootstrap. And then the second thing I'll highlight too, and a lot of the mentoring advising I do with entrepreneurs, is especially young or early stage, first-time founders. There's a common anecdote griping about the lack of early stage capital. I mostly disagree, but that's a longer-winded point. But what you just said right there about your deep expertise and experience and success in the industry, that's the what allows the opportunity to get pre-revenue funding. It's not a default path.
Yeah, and I think that, that takes time, right? But even for a time founder, having a network, a trust network where you've given more than you've received, I think is very important in a career. So spending time actually helping others, mentoring, contributing to other causes, just for the sake of the experience, or for the sake of helping out, where again, it's not about setting yourself up to get something in return. Is the right way to do that. And then when it comes time that you have an opportunity, that you have a big trust network that you can reach out to. And I tell you, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish what we did, especially the pace that we did, without that trust network of friends and co-founders. And a lot of the capital that we raised came from local, founders that have exited already, that I've got 10, 15, 20-year relationships with, because we've spent time growing businesses at the same time and helping each other, right? And staying in touch. And the other thing was, they called their friends and said, "Hey, this is a person I trust. Maybe you ought to take a look too." And that's once the ball started, this kind of rolling on it. That's how the raise went. And I'm not our other raise in the past that we did was with a VC, and it was a later stage raise at CallCopy. So and it was the team raising, not just me, right? And so rather than not just Matt and I in this case, it was a cool experience to go through, for sure. And so yeah, we'll kind of see how it goes. But now we have an early stage responsibility to shareholders as well, rather than just ourselves. And so I think that's a mindset that is very important, is understanding the commitment that you've made to the team of people that have invested in you. It's not just investing in your idea, it's investing in your ability to execute and be responsible in that execution. And so anyway, excited. We're just closing the round now, and it's been oversubscribed, which is just I'm blessed and thankful for that. But that means we need to double down and work even harder.
Well, it's a 1.5 million seed round, but in effect, it's raised friends and family round. So for the early stage entrepreneurs who are new to it and want to raise pre-revenue, work on that network and give. I love that you talk about giving. One of my probably oversighted books is Adam Grant's Give and Take. He's an organizational psychologist out of Wharton, and he explores the science of giving versus being transactional or expecting quid pro quo or reciprocity. Um, and I live that philosophy, and I'd encourage everyone to consider checking the book out. So it's often tricky balancing growth of team and business between burn rate or funding growth through profit. How do you make these decisions as you scale your companies, balancing growth of team and business?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely made mistakes along the way. Maybe I'll talk about that first. That's probably what people want to hear, right? We had a company, Motion CX, that we still were able to exit, but we definitely overhired. And what had happened was, we had a major telecom public company make a commitment to us to do a co-sell. And it was a big brand that's recognizable. And we got a little too excited that we had, gee, that was the product market fit, that was them validating that we were ready to get going. And so we geared up the team to support that. And but we should have waited until we understood their timing and their ability to execute, right? So just because they greenlit it at the CEO level and the CRO level doesn't mean that they have the ability to execute internally, right? And so we had months of meetings with very little traction, and it was non-obvious things. It was not that they didn't want to sell the product; it was that they didn't have the internal processes to support the accounting behind it, and it was a public company, and so there were checks and balances that they had to go through, and we underestimated the level of effort it would take to actually ramp that up. And so we figured we would gear up and solve more of the technical problems and get ahead on that. And we solved some really interesting problems for sure. And we had other customers as well. But the cash flow that just didn't align with the spend and the burn rate because of that. And we could have continued to invest, but by the time that we got there, we actually had a little bit of a problem too. COVID at the time had accelerated the market spend in our space, and so being in the unified communication space and call center space, companies like Zoom, for instance, did really well. Right? We all know that, right? Well, that was the same customer base we're going after in a lot of ways, and so the buying cycle was accelerated. So there was a bit of a dry cycle that happened at time there. So with that, that's one of my bigger lessons because it did result in us having to do layoffs, unfortunately. And these are people that we'd worked with in the past, actually, at CallCopy. We saw it coming, so I feel as though we did the best we could with giving plenty of notice and good packages and things like that. But it still was some of the toughest days in my career for sure. And so I think the big lesson there was I should have followed my gut and not overhired before the customer validation was proven through cash flow. And it's very hard to get out of a burn rate that's too high, if you will, without really tough decisions. When instead you can be a little more purposeful up front and do some bootstrapping type techniques to get to that validation and cash flow that's driven by it first. So that's always the thing that stands out to me when I kind of think back on some of those lessons, if you will.
I love that story. Something I frequently talk about is I consider layoffs mostly a management failure. And that's controversial in some circles. And the reason why I consider it a management failure is the reasons why you said. And you took the lesson, right? It's we we can in many cases, we can see the strategy and the potential failure scenarios. So if the decisions I make as a manager and executive, I want to be able to have 2 to 3 things happen outside of my control that don't force me to make decisions that I don't want to do. And the number one thing is typically around personnel. I
Yeah, absolutely.
go out of the way to have the best folks on the team and want to keep them on the team. Now, that's contrary to a lot of business culture now, especially in larger, more publicly traded companies. It's just like, golly gee whiz, or even in growth companies. I think we saw a big cycle of that because we had 15-year bull market in tech and cheap capital, right? So a lot of speculative activity, growth over business fundamentals, and boards were directing founders to grow at all costs, which meant spend money, right? So we had a cycle of layoffs that could have been avoided with
Oh,
different
that was
management
that cycle I
decisions.
participated in for sure. It was COVID, right? That was that cycle. That was when everybody's doing that. So wages were way inflated at the time as well. So the
Yeah,
cost of employees, you know,
those still haven't normalized. I'm struggling through that in part because cybersecurity.
right? Yeah, yeah,
I want to hire the best, and I generally want to pay the best, but
absolutely. Yeah,
it's not a normalized market right now.
no, no.
It's like, well, that's executive level base at a individual contributor's salary. Does that make sense? No.
Yeah, but the way we're taking we're treating that now, our brand is still a so unlike a corporate culture where you have teams of people, we're a very small, scrappy team, right? And so, we can I do not mind investing more in the right person or team members, and then seeing them grow because we'll learn from each other, and that's an important thing is that never stop learning, right? And so,
Mm,
working with people where you can kind of trade skills that you've accrued over the years is extremely important. And one of the newest skills is leveraging AI for the build process of technology. And I'm not talking about vibe coding. I mean, that's certainly a thing, but I'm talking about using it for things like prototyping and getting it in front of a customer and getting customer feedback the next day before you spend cycles building the wrong thing, right? Um, uh, or using it to secure your technology better, to create better structure around your code and better security within your code and things like that. So there's quite a bit that we're able to do now with AI that I know people are probably tired of hearing it, and a lot of it again goes to that vibe coding culture. And again, I'm not talking about that. That's not stuff you deploy. But there's real tangible value now, and it allows a developer to be better because they're not spending their time typing out the mundane bits. They're spending their time thinking more and thinking about strategy more, and then executing on that strategy and building. Actually, taking the time to build tests earlier in the cycle around the thing they're building, and that's the team that we've built or we are building, right, with the group that we have is people that are kind of focused on in those areas. And it's such an emerging space that we're constantly learning. Models are updated frequently, capabilities are updated frequently. And you can see the smile on my face right now because I'm like a kid in a candy store. It's where I spend almost all my time at this point, at least on the technical side. And so, but from a customer side, from a business growth perspective, what it's allowed us to do is iterate with our customers and our we're kind of in that pilot phase, if you will. So our pilot customers that have been with us and from concept to actual tangible return and value. One of them actually reached out and said, hey, you helped us save a customer that was going to churn, and these are $1 million contracts that they have, right? So even in this phase we're able to get there, and it's because of how we're using technology to our benefit. um, anyway, it's a little tangent there, but I think that's an important piece to the hiring side of things. It's not about replacing people, at least at this level. It's about making people better and learning new things along the way.
being intentional in
Yeah.
using modern tools, automation practices, AI, or non-traditional staffing strategy, right? Does everyone need to be a full-time employee? There are
Right.
a lot of ways we can think differently, and technology is letting us solve problems better in categories that technology hasn't been very good at solving before. Large sets of unstructured data, right? Uh,
Yeah. Well,
I like.
That's the world I live in. I mean, that's so. What Spearfish does, we haven't really talked about that, but we've come to realize that call centers, contact centers are just very data rich, right? You're sitting on a gold mine of phone calls that you've had with customers and chats and emails, and you have relational data in your CRMs or maybe in your Snowflake database or Databricks, wherever, right? And it's very hard to create structure around that to where you can extract value. And that's the high level terms. What I mean is literally asking questions of your phone calls and saying why are customers having to reach out in the first place? Can we do better? Can we be more proactive? Are our products good enough? Is our service of those products good enough? We're able to allow customers to ask those questions and create signals around that. And typically in the call center space, your measurements were what's my average handling time? So how long do we spend on the phones on average? Did my agent do what they were trained to do? And then did the customer take a survey and what was it? Right. And we don't need to do that. Like, why are we surveying customers when we have their phone calls? We actually have their voice. We can listen to them. The technology didn't exist to be able to extract the signals from that noise in a meaningful way. And that's what we've built. It's kind of the holy grail of our industry, right? Because we started with call recording, right? So we, as a group, made some of the earlier versions of this technology and just wished we could get to this point. And now we're here, right? And so, from a career pathing standpoint, it's I don't know, we're doing things we wish we could have done all along. And the challenge, though, is that we're in an emerging field. So we're having to also help our customers by training them to think about the problem differently. A lot of our industry is taking the old version of whatever the thing is and just adding AI to it and automating the old thing. But it's answering the wrong questions. It's not actually creating a difference other than maybe a little bit of labor reduction, right? And we said, hey, that creates an opportunity for us because the market's going to miss the bigger picture problem or bigger picture solve, which is with AI used properly, the handling time probably of a call doesn't matter. It's, did I make a meaningful impact with the customer? Did I solve their problem? Did I create a longer standing relationship? And did I figure out, do I have a way to find root causes so I can prevent problems in the first place from happening, right? And this applies across many verticals. We've had the customer that we saved that I mentioned is a broadband company that sells internet to apartment complexes. And we found that the training protocol was set up for a very specific type of troubleshooting call, but they used the same training protocol across all calls. And what that led to was 7 minutes of Q&A. I kid you not, 7 minutes of information gathering before they actually started working on the problem that the customer called about in the first place. That was something you couldn't measure before, but we can say how long into the call does it take until you get to the thing the customer called about in the first place. So we created a metric in our software called time to relevance, and now we
Mhm.
can measure that. Think about that. If you knew that across your call center calls, you'd be astonished at how much time is wasted on these calls. And that creates then opportunities to improve processes, maybe automate. There's lots of ways that you can solve that problem that the customer would prefer to go through anyway, right? And it saves you money and all these things. And so that's why we're so excited about what we're building. But anyway, in a nutshell, we found that our market was, instead of focusing on those problems, they were focused on making bots sound like they're human. Making the voice sound realistic and solving latency issues, which is a very necessary piece, but that becomes our partner channel. So we make those bots smart, right? And right now they're not smart. We've all experienced it. And so anyway, I had to talk about what we're building because it's just such a cool time to be building something like this.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
excited hearing about it. I fire companies every day who waste my time. If they don't interact well with me as a customer, there's not room in my life. So thank you. You're
And
making the
truly
world a
care.
better place for us.
Yeah, and truly care about it. That's the key thing. And a lot of companies do. They've just been lost without data. I mean, the data's been there, but been no way to extract meaning out of it. And so we're going to see a very big shift in the next 5 years or so.
Thank you so much for being here, Ray. Some fantastic stories. Do you have any closing thoughts, books, anything you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh my gosh, I've got a whole page of notes over here. But so you mentioned books. The Innovator's Dilemma is a very timely book right now for people. It's a story about how incumbent brands have a hard time making very big market transitions and changes. So they talk, I always talk about Kodak when we think about that, right? They didn't go to digital photography. This book is a couple of decades old, so they first speak about the hard drive industry, but the patterns are the same, right? And so I think we're experiencing that pattern again right now. And generally speaking, a large multi-billion dollar brand has an existing pipeline off of the technology they built. And we're going into a market where the licensing model completely changes. How you purchase technology changes. So the incumbents have a real tough thing because they have to erode their existing sales pipelines and customer bases to be able to make the transition, which is not a very easy feat. So that then creates a market where they either fail or they likely have to buy their way out of it. And so that then causes a whole bunch of acquisitions and a whole acquisition cycle. And so I'm kind of thinking that's what we're going to see. And so that's a good book for that. For managing businesses, I was invited to a class years ago around a book called Mastering the Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish. There's a second version called Scaling Up, which is their second edition of that. I still like the original edition, and it creates a communication style and strategy for your business on how to set kind of your they call them BHAGs, big hairy audacious goals. I don't think they coined that term. I think that's used in other places, but the daily stand up structure, the weekly meetings, the monthlies. I would say the book is written as if you're supposed to follow the structure perfectly. I found that it's best to adapt it to your own style and stick to a pattern and having a cadence and is more important than specifically the structure itself. But very good book though for management of a high growth company.
Fantastic books, Ray. Thanks for those. I think BHAG's from Seven Habits, Stephen Covey.
Maybe. Okay.
But
He references
it's
Covey in that book, so that makes sense. Yeah, and that's a great book too. I mean, there's a whole pile of them, right? That is
yeah.
absolutely one of the timeless books.
I'm rereading it right now. It was one of my early top list books, but scaling up, mastering the
Crossing the
Rockefeller
Chasm is another oldie but a goodie, right? That's a reread for sure.
Well, cool. Thank you for listening to Project Gamma, presented by GammaForce.io. If you've enjoyed this podcast, check us out on your favorite podcast platform to catch future episodes. Thanks, Ray.
Absolutely. Thank you, Warner.